The laughter started before she even sat down, not loud, not obvious, but sharp enough to cut. Rachel Monroe froze at the edge of the ballroom, her hand tightening around the strap of her purse as she scanned the rows of decorated tables. Crystal chandeliers shimmered above. The company's annual leadership gala was in full swing. Waiters floated between tables with silver trays. Soft jazz hummed beneath polite applause, and then she saw it. Her name. Card. Placed deliberately at the very back. Right beside Ethan Cole. A ripple of whispers passed across 3 tables. The moment she spotted it, oh no. They actually did it. This is going to be good. Rachel inhaled slowly. She had worked at Norcaris Holdings for 6 years. Long enough to recognize staged humiliation when she saw it. She was the only single mother in upper management. And Ethan. He was the quiet, invisible single father who worked in operations, rarely spoke, never attended after-hours events, and left precisely at 5 o'clock every day. The office rumor mill had labeled him socially awkward, boring and forgettable. Tonight, apparently, they were the punchline. Rachel straightened shoulders and walked toward the table. Every step felt like walking into a spotlight. Ethan was already seated, gray suit. No tie, posture straight, but reserved. His hands rested calmly on the table, fingers loosely interlocked. He looked up briefly when she approached, offering a small, respectful nod. Not embarrassed, not annoyed, just calm. Rachel pulled out her chair and sat from the executive table near the front. She saw Melissa Harding from HR whisper something into someone's ear. A few stifled laughs followed. The joke was obvious. 2 single parents. 2 lonely coworkers. Put them together and see what happens. Rachel forced a polite smile and reached for her water glass. Silence stretched between her and Ethan, but it wasn't uncomfortable, it felt intentional. After a few moments, Ethan spoke quietly. "I'm sorry." She looked at him surprised. "For what?" "For being part of someone else's entertainment." His voice was low, steady. No bitterness. Just honesty. Rachel exhaled slowly. "Story of my life." Across the room, someone from sales called out loudly, "Hey, Rachel! You finally found someone who leaves work early, too." Laughter erupted. Another voice chimed in. "Careful, Ethan. She's way out of your league." More laughter. Rachel felt her face warm, but she refused to look down. Beside her, Ethan didn't react. He simply folded his napkin. Carefully on his lap, Rachel studied him from the corner of her eye. There was something unusual about the way he carried himself. Most people being mocked would fidget, or force a smile, or shrink. He did none of those things. He sat still, grounded, as if he wasn't bothered, not because he was numb, but because he was above it. The first course was served. Rachel barely touched her food. She had spent the last 3 years fighting to rebuild her life after her divorce, raising her 8-year-old son, Caleb, alone, working late nights after bedtime, pretending she didn't hear coworkers question how she managed. Must be hard without a husband. Don't you worry about dating. Isn't it exhausting doing everything alone? She had mastered the art of smiling through condescension. But tonight felt different. Tonight. They weren't just whispering. They were performing. Ethan picked up his fork and took a measured bite. "Your son?" he said quietly without looking at her. "How old is he?" Rachel blinked. 8. Caleb. A faint smile touched Ethan's lips. "My daughter's 9, Ava." Rachel felt something shift. "You never talk about her. You never talk about Caleb." She almost laughed. Fair point. Across the ballroom, the CEO still hadn't arrived. Speculation buzzed. People were drinking more freely. Now Melissa from HR approached their table again, this time with a dramatic sigh. "You two look so serious. Relax. It's just a little matchmaking fun." Rachel met her eyes directly. "Does it look fun?" Melissa's smile faltered. Before she could respond, Ethan finally looked up, not at Melissa, but toward the front entrance. The room quieted suddenly. The CEO had arrived. All eyes turned, except Ethan's. He remained still. Rachel noticed something strange. The CEO, Richard Langston, wasn't heading toward the executive table. He was scanning the room, as if searching. Then, unbelievably, his gaze locked onto Ethan, and he smiled. Not a polite corporate smile, a warm one. He changed direction. Whispers rippled like electricity. Why is he going back there? Is that Ethan? Richard Langston walked directly to their table. Rachel felt her heartbeat in her throat. The entire ballroom had gone silent. The CEO stopped beside Ethan. Then he did something that shattered every assumption in the room. He extended his hand. Ethan, I'm glad you made it. Ethan stood calmly and shook it. Of course. Richard looked at Rachel next. You? Must be Rachel Monroe. I've heard impressive things. Her mind spun. He had heard of her? From who? Richard turned back to Ethan. I was hoping you'd join me at the front table tonight. Silence was suffocating. Melissa's face had gone pale. Someone dropped a fork. Ethan gave a small, almost apologetic glance toward Rachel. I'm fine here. Richard's eyebrows lifted slightly. You're sure? The board members were asking about you. The board. The board? Rachel's stomach flipped. Richard chuckled softly. Well, if you change your mind. The seat's yours. Then he added, loud enough for half the room to hear. We wouldn't be celebrating record profits this year without your strategy. A collective gasp. Strategy. Profits. Rachel turned slowly toward Ethan. He simply resumed his seat. The CEO returned to the front, but the energy in the room had transformed. The laughter was gone, replaced by something else. Confusion. Respect. Fear. Fear. Rachel lowered her voice. What was that? Ethan poured himself another glass of water. Just work. Just work, she whispered. He met her gaze fully for the first time, and there it was. Confidence. Not flashy, not arrogant, but undeniable. They like to let me operate quietly. Pieces began rearranging in Rachel's mind. The early departures, the silence, the isolation. It wasn't weakness, it was choice. Across the room, people were staring openly now. The sales manager who had mocked him earlier avoided eye contact. Melissa disappeared entirely. Rachel felt something unexpected rise inside her. Not embarrassment, not pity, admiration. You knew, she said softly. You knew they were joking. Yes. And you didn't care? Ethan paused. I care about what matters. Band resumed playing, but no one was really listening. The room had shifted around them. The joke had collapsed, and something far bigger had just begun, Rachel realized. Something in that moment. They hadn't placed her beside him as punishment. They had accidentally placed her beside power, and none of them knew who he really was. The night was far from over, and neither was the lesson. The music resumed, but the mood never quite recovered. Rachel could feel it, the subtle shift in posture. The lowered voices, the stolen glances now filled with calculation instead of amusement. Only minutes ago, she and Ethan had been the entertainment. Now, they were the mystery. Across the ballroom, the executives leaned toward one another, whispering. The same people who had laughed now avoided looking in their direction. Rachel turned slightly toward Ethan. You never mentioned any of that, she said. Carefully, Ethan adjusted his cuff as if the conversation were ordinary. There wasn't a reason to? A reason? She repeated. You've just got personally greeted by the CEO in front of the entire company. He gave a small, almost amused exhale. Titles don't change who I am at home. That answer caught her off guard. Most people chased visibility, promotions, recognition, validation. He seemed untouched by it. Waiter passed by, offering champagne. Ethan declined politely. Rachel noticed the wedding band indentation on his left hand, faint but still visible. "You said you have a daughter?" she said gently. "Ava," he replied. His expression softened instantly. "She's the only board I answer to." Rachel smiled, despite herself. On the other side of the room, Melissa from HR reappeared, though her earlier confidence had vanished. She approached cautiously this time. "Ethan," she began, forcing a bright tone, "we had no idea you were involved in the corporate restructuring project. That must have been exciting." Ethan looked at her with the same calm expression he'd worn all evening. "It was necessary." Melissa swallowed. "Well, everyone's very impressed." Rachel noticed what Melissa didn't say. "We're sorry, because apologies would mean admitting intention, and intention meant accountability." The room gradually returned to chatter, but it was different now, guarded, curious, respectful in a reluctant way. Rachel leaned closer to Ethan. "Why stay quiet all these years?" He paused before answering. "When my wife passed," he said quietly, "I learned something important. People assume things when they don't know your story. Some assume weakness. Some assume failure. It doesn't matter. My job is to provide stability for my daughter, not satisfy curiosity." Rachel felt her chest tighten. "I'm sorry," she whispered. He nodded once. "You divorced," she replied. "Long fight. Messy ending." After that, everyone decided my personal life was public property. Ethan's gaze held understanding, not pity. "That's the problem with labels," he said. "Single mom, single dad. People reduce you to survival mode." She let out a soft breath. "And tonight, they tried to reduce us to a joke." "Yes," he agreed calmly. "But jokes only work when both sides laugh." At the front table, the CEO stood to make a toast. He spoke about leadership, integrity, vision. Then he added something unexpected. "And I want to acknowledge someone who prefers staying behind the scenes. The strategy that saved this company millions came from a man who proves humility is the highest form of strength. Ethan Cole." This time, the applause wasn't hesitant. It was loud, sincere. Rachel watched Ethan. Carefully, he didn't stand immediately. He didn't soak it in. He simply placed his napkin down, rose with composure, nodded once in acknowledgement before sitting again. No speech. No grand gesture. Power without performance. As the applause faded, Rachel felt something shift inside her. All these years, she had fought to prove herself, to be seen as capable despite being a single mother, and here sat a man who never tried to prove anything at all. And yet, everyone now saw him. "Do you ever get tired of being underestimated?" she asked. Ethan's lips curved faintly. "Only when it hurts my daughter." The honesty in that answer stayed with her. Across the ballroom, the same sales manager who had mocked him earlier approached slowly. "Ethan," he said, awkward smile in place. "Didn't know you were?" "You know?" Ethan raised an eyebrow. "I don't," the man corrected quickly. "I mean, impressive work." "Thank you," Ethan replied simply. No bitterness, no triumph, just grace. The man retreated. Visibly unsettled, Rachel realized something profound in that moment. Instant karma didn't always arrive with fireworks. Sometimes it came as silence, as dignity, as undeniable truth. She had walked into that ballroom, feeling like a target. Now she felt something else, aligned, seen, and unexpectedly hopeful, because maybe tonight wasn't about humiliation. Maybe it was about revelation. And maybe, just maybe, the real story was only beginning by the time dessert was served. The atmosphere had completely transformed. No one was laughing anymore. Instead, people were watching. Rachel noticed how conversations shifted whenever Ethan stood to refill his water. The same colleagues who once brushed past him in the hallway were now offering tight smiles and respectful nods. It was almost unsettling. Power hadn't changed him, but it had changed. Rachel studied him quietly. "Does this bother you?" she asked, the sudden attention. "Yes." Ethan placed his glass down carefully. It tells me they were always capable of respect. They just chose not to give it. That answer lingered in her mind. Across the ballroom, the regional director approached their table, a man who had once rejected Rachel's proposal without reading past the first page. "Ethan," he began. "Overly friendly. We should talk about expanding your strategy nationwide." "My strategy?" Ethan asked calmly. The director hesitated. "Well, yes. The cost recovery system." Rachel's eyes widened. "You designed that?" she asked softly. Ethan nodded once. "At home. After Ava went to sleep." The simplicity of it stunned her. While people had mocked his early exits, he had been going home to help with homework, then building systems that saved the company millions. The director continued speaking, but Rachel barely heard him. She saw something else now: the late nights, the quiet sacrifice, the weight he carried without applause. When the director finally left, she turned to Ethan. "You could have told them. You could have demanded credit." Shook his head. "Credit doesn't tuck my daughter in at night." The words hit her deeply. For years, Rachel had pushed herself to exhaustion trying to prove she wasn't just a single mom. She took on extra projects, stayed late, missed school events, all to silence whispers. And yet here was a man who understood, something she hadn't fully accepted. Worth isn't proven in boardrooms. It's proven in character. Suddenly, the CEO returned to their table once more. "Ethan," he said warmly, "the board would like you to attend Monday's strategic summit." A ripple of nearby conversations stopped again. "That won't be possible," Ethan replied evenly. Rachel blinked. "Refused the board?" The CEO looked surprised. "May I ask why?" "My daughter has a school recital Monday evening." "I don't miss those." Silence spread like a wave. The CEO studied him for a long moment. Then, to everyone's shock, he nodded. "Family first," he said. "We'll reschedule." Just like that, it was settled. No argument, no consequence. Respect. Rachel felt something rise in her chest: admiration, mixed with disbelief all night. People had underestimated him because he left at 5, because he didn't socialize, because he didn't perform. Importance, but true influence, didn't beg for validation, it commanded it, quietly as the CEO walked away. Rachel spoke softly. "They thought you were invisible." Ethan gave a faint smile. "Invisibility is useful. It lets you see who people really are." She looked around the room at the forced smiles, the sudden politeness, the shifting alliances. He was right. Tonight hadn't revealed who Ethan was. It had revealed everyone else. Rachel straightened in her seat. For the first time in years, she didn't feel small. She felt empowered, because sitting beside him wasn't a punishment, it was perspective. And somewhere between humiliation and revelation, something inside her had changed. Maybe the joke wasn't on them after all. Maybe the lesson was just beginning. Gala ended with softer applause than it began. But the silence that followed Rachel and Ethan as they walked toward the exit was louder than any laughter from earlier that night. People moved aside. Doors were held open. Voices lowered. Rachel almost wanted to laugh at the sudden transformation. Outside, the cool night air felt grounding. The city lights shimmered across the parking lot. For the first time all evening, she could breathe without feeling watched. "I used to hate events like this," she admitted as they walked toward their cars. Ethan glanced at her. "Used to." "Yes," she said thoughtfully. Tonight felt different. Paused near his car, turning to face her fully. "Different how?" "Because for once, I didn't feel like the smallest person in the room." Ethan studied her expression carefully, as if measuring the weight of her words. "You were never small," he said. "They just needed someone to project onto." The statement struck her deeper than he probably realized. For years, Rachel had allowed other people's opinions to define her worth, the whispered judgments about being divorced, the subtle doubts about her ability to balance motherhood and leadership. She had internalized them, believed them, until tonight. Her phone buzzed in her hand. A message from Caleb's babysitter. He's asleep. Asked if you had fun? Rachel smiled softly. I used to think I had to prove something to everyone at work, she said quietly. That being a single mom made me less capable. So I overworked, overcompensated. Ethan nodded in understanding. And did it help? No, she admitted. It just made me tired. For a moment, they stood in comfortable silence beneath the parking lot lights. You know, Ethan said, unlocking his car, they didn't seat you beside me because they thought you were weak. Oh, Rachel looked at him. Confused, they seated you beside me because they thought we were the same? We are, she replied gently. He shook his head. Slightly, we are strong in ways they don't measure. The truth of that settled between them. Across the lot, a group of co-workers exited the building. Their conversation hushed when they saw Ethan, the same sales manager who had mocked him earlier, gave a small nod, almost respectful. Rachel noticed something subtle. Ethan didn't gloat. He didn't change his posture. He remained exactly who he had been before the reveal. Power hadn't altered. Him, it had simply exposed the shallowness of others. Her phone buzzed again. This time, an email notification from the CEO. Her heart skipped. She opened it quickly. Subject: leadership advancement. Inside was a short message. Rachel, after observing your composure and professionalism this evening, I would like to discuss expanding your role in strategic operations. Your resilience does not go unnoticed. She stared at the screen. Resilience, not availability, not personal life. Resilience. She looked up at Ethan. Eyes wide. He didn't ask what the message said. He simply smiled, as if he already knew. Sometimes he said calmly, being underestimated creates space for your character too. Speak. Rachel felt emotion rise unexpectedly in her chest. All those years of silent endurance, all those nights, wondering if she was invisible. Tonight, the room had shifted, not because she demanded respect, but because she carried herself with it. They tried to make a joke out of us, she said softly. And instead, Ethan replied, they gave us a stage. She let out a quiet laugh. You're not what they expected, he agreed. But neither are you. The parking lot lights flickered slightly as a breeze passed through. Rachel felt something powerful settle inside her. Not revenge. It's not pride. Peace for once. Justice hadn't come through confrontation. It had come through exposure. They hadn't needed to defend themselves. Truth had done it for them. As Ethan got into his car, he paused. See you Monday. After the recital, she reminded him with a smile. After the recital, he confirmed. Rachel watched his car pull away before walking to her own for the first time in years. She wasn't dreading Monday morning because the dynamic had changed, and not just in the office. Inside her, respect, she realized, isn't demanded, it's reflected, and tonight, the mirror had turned. Monday morning arrived with a tension Rachel could feel before she even stepped into the building. The lobby, once filled with casual chatter, seemed quieter. Not silent, but aware. As she walked toward the elevators, conversations paused. Not in mockery this time, in acknowledgement. Two assistants greeted her with warm smiles. A department manager she barely knew held the elevator door and said, "Morning." Rachel, with unexpected sincerity, she wasn't invisible anymore. But what surprised her most was how calm she felt. When she reached her floor, she saw Ethan already at his desk. Simple gray suit again. Same composed posture. Same quiet focus. Nothing about him had changed, and yet everything had. A few employees approached his desk cautiously throughout the morning, asking thoughtful questions about operations, requesting feedback, even thanking him for previous guidance. Rachel watched carefully. He treated each person exactly the same way he had before the gala, respectfully, without Through noon. Melissa from HR appeared near Rachel's office door. She hesitated before stepping in. "Rachel," she began, softer than usual, I wanted to say. "About Friday night." Rachel waited. Melissa swallowed. It was inappropriate. The seating arrangement, the comments. I should have stopped it. Rachel studied her for a moment. This wasn't forced politeness. It was discomfort. And maybe growth. "I appreciate that," Rachel replied evenly. "But the real question is, why did it seem funny in the first place?" Melissa didn't have an immediate answer. Because the truth was, it's uncomfortable. It was funny to them because they believed single. Parents were desperate, lonely, lesser. Melissa nodded slowly. "We'll be revising some internal policies about workplace conduct." That mattered. Not revenge. Reform. After she left. Rachel leaned back in her chair. Instant karma wasn't about public humiliation. It was about awareness. Later that afternoon, the CEO called a leadership meeting. Rachel entered the conference room to find Ethan already seated at the table, not at the back, but alongside senior executives. No one questioned it. The CEO cleared his throat. As we move forward, he said, "I want leadership defined by character, not charisma. Results matter. Integrity matters more." His eyes briefly met Ethan's, then Rachel's. "I'll be restructuring certain departments," he continued. "Rachel Monroe will join strategic operations effective immediately." Few eyebrows lifted, but there was no laughter, no. Whispers, just acceptance. Rachel felt steady, not shocked. She had earned this long before the gala. It just took one night for everyone else to see it. After the meeting, she caught up with Ethan in the hallway. "You knew this was coming," she said lightly. "I hoped it would," he replied. "For me. For fairness," she smiled. "Are you going to the summit now that it's rescheduled?" He shook his head gently. "It still conflicts with Ava's recital." Rachel laughed softly. "You're impossible." "No," he corrected calmly. "I'm consistent." That word stayed with her. Consistent. In a world that rewarded performance. He valued presence. As the workday ended, employees packed up more quietly than usual. The careless jokes were gone. The whispering had stopped. Respect had replaced it. Rachel gathered her things and walked toward the exit beside Ethan. "You realize," she said thoughtfully, "they tried to make us the punchline." Instead, he replied, "They revealed the problem." She nodded. Sometimes justice wasn't loud. Sometimes it was subtle. A shift in culture. A correction in behavior. A lesson learned without confrontation. They stepped outside into the fading sunlight too. Single parents once underestimated, now undeniable, and the most powerful part. They hadn't changed who they were. They had simply refused to shrink.